Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here back again in Mauritius. The first time I came here was 25 years ago under invitation from Mr. Samper when I was in the United Nations. I was the Chief Security Officer of the UN. And actually, at that time, we had another amazing technology that we were introducing for first time ever in the world, which was the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is 25 years old today. Actually, we have been celebrating in January this year with Tim Berners-Lee the World Wide Web. And it has been really an amazing technology. It has revolutionized the world. It has allowed 6 billion people to be connected. It has allowed an unprecedented amount of knowledge and data to be circulated on a daily basis. It has included people that they were excluded from financial sectors. It had allowed traders around the world to trade online and sell their products using a simple mobile phone. It has boosted the mobile phone infrastructure. Thanks to the World Wide Web, now you have nearly 4 billion mobile phones. It has powered the Internet of Things. 20 billion objects are going to be connected to the Internet by the year 2020. And those objects, all of them, they had been using the web architecture as a way of connecting among themselves and to their respective organization. So a lot of people ask me, wow, what is this blockchain now? It's something that is going to displace the web. It sits on the top of the web. It's something that is in competition to the web. And actually, to be honest, and I have been in technology all my life and continues to be, the technology world works like Hollywood a bit. So, you know, I don't know if any of you had been seeing the Ben-Hur movie, the first one with Charlotte Heston. I know a lot of you did. And now, a few weeks ago, there has been released a new Ben-Hur movie. It's basically the same. The actors are less charismatic. The movie is less well done. But it has amazing special effects, which brings the new generation to say, wow, this is a great movie. But technology is about that too. Blockchain is an amazing technology, and I don't have to say anything against blockchain. But blockchain uses a lot of the World Wide Web, PKI, cryptographic root key, timestamping, digital signature, and so on, that they are not blockchain related. So my presentation today is to bring the blockchain to the right perspective. Because otherwise, we're going to be committing the mistakes of the past. You know, I remember when I introduced here the first time the World Wide Web 25 years ago in Mauritius. Mauritius actually became one of the first countries in the world to apply the web. And actually, you are known for that. And Mauritius become a hub on the same title than Singapore become a hub, or Switzerland, where I live, become a hub. And actually, 15 years later, we came back to Singapore and we developed your first e-commerce platform, which was sitting on the World Wide Web. And Mauritius became one of the first e-commerce platforms, which was very safe, very trusted, using already PKI, and being positioned in the world as an internet hub. Internet hubs are important because who is the hub has the possibility to create an ecosystem. And this is what is all my presentation about. It's helping Mauritius to become, again, a blockchain platform. So the next ecosystem of blockchain is something that can facilitate the growth and the economy of this country. So just introducing WISeKey. So WISeKey I created when I left the UN. I realized that all the cryptographic keys were Americans. I worked all my life on interoperability on cryptographic keys. I have a cryptography environment sitting in my organization, which I started to create what you call interoperability of cryptographic roots. So I took American root, Chinese root, Russian roots, Saudi Arabian roots, and I tried to put them together. It didn't work out, to be honest, because what happened on the web is that the web, once was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, it basically, he forgot something essential on the web, and he recognizes that. I was with him actually in Davos. We organized a very interesting roundtable in Davos with very interesting people to talk about blockchain. And one of the things Tim Berners-Lee said is that when he invented the World Wide Web, he did not consider any importance to create a cryptographic identity layer. So the web doesn't have an identity. The person connecting to the web does not exist on the web. The web is an interconnection of machines. So the person was left out of the web. And that's what created a very complex situation where we are suffering every day, that all the attacks, all the data compromission, everything that happens on the web is actually based on the fact that there was not identity. The job of Tim Berners-Lee when he developed the World Wide Web, which was actually the software of the ARPANET, which is a military system, as you know, from the United States, was not to secure anything. He wanted just to interconnect sites very easy and very fast. And actually, he was the first blockchain. Everybody talks about ledger and be able real time to see whether somebody has done a transaction and this transaction cannot be modified. What about HTTP? What about DNS? This is what it's about, right? If you create a website anywhere in the world, that website shows up. And nobody can, with the exception of ICANN, take you out. So that principle of being able to interconnect fast without the possibility of manipulation was already designed. The problem there, because you didn't have an identity, the problem is, which is the same problem, by the way, of the blockchain, is how can I am 100% sure that the party that is transacting with me is a trusted party? And this philosophy of creating peer-to-peer trust, that sounds very bad. Trust is a human emotion. Trust is not a computer behavior. So trust cannot be delegated mathematically. Trust is a complex function. The only way that you can delegate trust is by basically replicating the human emotion around trust and trying through the internet and technology to apply that emotion as close as you can to what could be a transaction. So there are examples of using the internet for very complex transactions. In Switzerland, my company developed the first e-voting project on the internet using cryptographic root key, dual sign signature, PKI, and the possibility of the government to cast a binding e-voting transaction. So this is changing the democracy of Switzerland. And we do that many times because we are the country in the world that votes more. So obviously, hardening the possibility of manipulating trust is still possible. I mean, you could still do things to usurpate the identity of the voters, but we reduce the risk to the minimum. Now, with blockchain technology, we can aggregate to that. I mean, there's new ways to add it, so we are sure that that identity can be stored in a ledger and you can check the ledger, and that's fine. But my point is that blockchain is not the old solution that changes everything and replaces everything. It's an evolutionary solution. Evolutionates on the base and in the back of a World Wide Web infrastructure that we have in place. And this is very important to remember because we have the tendency to just say, forget about what we have, let's start again. So new companies will emerge, new leaders will emerge, but you will just replicate and create the same issues that we have. Another issue is the internet governance. As you know, the internet has been governed, and it still is. ICANN just announced a few months ago that the US government is releasing the ownership of the ICANN so-called controls to give it that to the private sector, which is a great news. But who are going to be the private sector? Are going to take the keys of the ICANN. So those are the issues that they are being discussed now. And those issues just give you only one lesson, is that you as a country, you as an independent country, you should also have, and this was the same vision of Switzerland when we convinced the Swiss government a few years ago to move big time on the internet. You need to create a Mauritius on the internet. Mauritius needs to exist. As a country, as you have physically access in the country, you have customs, you have borders, you have airports, the same thing you need to have on the internet. And blockchain could be a way to achieve that, provided that you have a few other things. So as I say, the way we see why the blockchain ecosystem is emerging is because the underground infrastructure is already in place. So I am very concerned, to be honest, about the ownership of the blockchain because I am a cryptographer and I have been working on many serious crypt developments in the United Nations, and anonymity on the source of the encryption is always of concern. So obviously, if the blockchain becomes bigger than what it is, who invented the blockchain, how it was invented, who owns those code, who have revocation access to those keys, because blockchain is a PKI. I think there was a question before, what is the relation between blockchain and PKI? Blockchain is a branded PKI, where we are just taking away the certification authority, and we are creating a peer-to-peer relations between certificates. which is okay, but certificates X509, which is an ITOS standard, which is the standard for certificate, requires somebody from the root key all the way down to the CA and the RA to sign your digital certificate. Otherwise, that certificate cannot be traded. So doing that as a peer-to-peer is the same discussion we always had about whether peer-to-peer transactions are as secure as vertical transactions, right? So how to mix both, and this is what I believe is important, is to buy building ecosystem. It's not the same thing to develop a blockchain for e-voting than to develop a blockchain for land registry or to develop a blockchain to store all the data. What the only thing, some people ask me, can you explain me blockchain in 2 seconds, please? I'm trying to understand. And the only really thing I believe the blockchain does and the web doesn't do is that if you send me a PDF file where you have a contract and you digitally sign your contract. So you go all the way, you issue a certification authority, you go and you put a PDF signing, you insert your certificate and you send to me. You still has a copy of it, right? So you're just sending me a copy. You're not sending me the real document because you keep a copy. The internet is not able, the web, to take away that copy from you and give it to me. So that is okay for normal documentation. I mean, if you send me an email, the same thing, you keep the email. But what about if you send me money? I mean, it will be crazy if you send me $100 and you keep the $100, right? So that's why you need to change the situation. Because it's not the same sending something that you can keep a copy to sending something where you need somebody in the middle, which is the trusted party, to say, yeah, this $100 is not anymore in his account, that you left, and I can certify that. That's the big difference. That's what blockchain does, because that transaction is recorded in a ledger, and through the ledger you can certify that this money has arrived. So if you extrapolate that to all sorts of transactions, obviously it's much better. It includes one layer that the web doesn't have. But doesn't replace all the layers. I still need to digitally sign that document or that transaction. I still need to negotiate that key with some authority. So if that transaction is a bill of landing that comes from the customs authority, the customs authority should be the certification authority. If that is a voting, then the chancellor should be involved in that transaction. And countries should have CAs, which are cryptographically attached to a national root key. And that root key, which is the case in many countries, needs to be trusted by the government. And in some countries like India, which are issuing 1.6 billion biometric keys, the fight between the government to who owns that cryptographic key. I mean, it should be the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Economy. So it's a big debate, and it's a good debate to start to create those interoperability trust model between government agencies to say, if we create a national cryptographic root key, which is then embedded into millions of browsers, we are internationally recognized, and then we can use that cryptographic root key to issue identities. And then once those identities land into a specific ecosystem, whether it's customs, insurance, trade, those ecosystems then delegates those keys through a segmented blockchain. It could be viewed what we call a private blockchain versus an open blockchain, because an open blockchain you cannot control. And an open blockchain, you could just replace 90% of the government and it will work. And that's exactly what an open blockchain is. You cannot be controlled. Although they are trying to add new regulations on the top of that blockchain, but it's impossible because the entire concept of a blockchain is not to be controllable. So basically what we are doing is simple that, right? I mean, the world we are living now is a world where you have the current system, which is everybody wants to become an identity provider. I mean, WISeKey is my company, issues identity. We have 3.6 billion browsers already where we have our cryptographic key. I have now 12 billion sensors and IoT devices where I'm putting my keys. I have 1.6 billion mobile phones which already have our cryptographic keys. This key has been downloaded since 1999. So I have my identity ecosystem. I am in competition with Facebook and with Google. All of them, they have their identity ecosystem. I mean, Facebook Connects is an identity ecosystem. Basically collects your ID, data mines you through your behavior in your world, and with those algorithms, Facebook knows more and more about you on a constant basis. So then the hope of Facebook is that one day that identity becomes a de facto identity, and that identity is then used as a way to bring you into transactions, including blockchain transactions. So winning the identity space is where the battle is. And why I am succeeding maybe more than then is because our philosophy on WISeKey was that the identity does not belong to the platform. I don't want Facebook, I don't want Google, I don't want Yahoo, I don't want any platform to own my identity, because in our view, an identity is like your birth certificate. The identity belongs to the user. And then once you control your identity and you have what we could be a live KYC type of model, then you can use that identity, which you could store in your mobile phone or on your sensor, on your object, or your laptop, or in your cloud. You could use that identity to do all kinds of binding transactions, because that identity will be recognized by the cryptographic root key, and as a consequence by all the certification authorities which are under that root key. So the problem we are facing now, and again, this is a $1 trillion economy. It's no way that blockchain is going to replace that. This is the issue of identity is something that blockchain doesn't do well, because it fits the purpose of having an identity per se. So this market of winning the identity layer is a massive market. What is happening is that because the cryptographic root keys that they are used to issue identities were all mainly issued by the United States originally, you have RSA, Entrust, VeriSign, Cybertrust, all these companies, they were the cryptographic root keys. So why Singapore, why India started to use their own cryptographic root key? Because this is something you should own in the future. So the first thing you have to do here in Mauritius is create your own cryptographic root key at national level. And that's an easy task. You don't need a lot of consensus of that. You just need to put the right people, create your own cryptographic root key, and then every single browser in the world, every single object in the world, every single sensor in the world, thinking that we are going to have 20 billion of them, will have that root key embedded into it. So the day that you want to activate that key because you want to do any transaction, you are going to be already. It's like having real estate property. It's like buying a boutique avenue, right? This is what it is. You need to have, if you don't have a cryptographic root key, somebody has it for you. And you're going to be under that root key the rest of your life. And what happened is that that organization or government or whoever has that key has revocation rights on your keys. So once the first thing you have to get is the identity layer. So this identity layer is something that the blockchain does in a total different way. It's the peer-to-peer model, which was one of the questions to the previous speaker, is how PKI relates to blockchain. So it might be cases where peer-to-peer is enough. I don't really need, maybe, I did a project with the FC Barcelona, the soccer team came to me and say, we only have 18 million socios, which is the people playing. I want to download 300 million Chinese visitors, and I want an ID. Can you help me? And we did help him. We created an app, and FC Barcelona, through that app, collects now 300 million Chinese consumers. Then they download the app and issues an identity and buy merchandising into the app of the FC Barcelona. And in that model, I don't need a trusted authority on the top of that, because the only thing they do is to exchange data among themselves. They buy merchandise. They access TV online. They can see the matches through their mobile phone from China. So in those cases, a blockchain peer-to-peer interaction of identity might be enough. It will not necessarily be enough for e-voting. I mean, you will not imagine a peer-to-peer blockchain e-voting system where users create a grassroots key enough to vote, because you need to have an attribute, and this is what blockchain doesn't have and PKI has, is the attributes. In a PKI model, an identity is who you are, and this is all what we call a PII, personal identifiable information. It's always encrypted, so you don't want anybody to know that. But then you put attribute, my financial ID, when I am dealing with the bank, my health ID, when I'm dealing with the health authorities, my education ID, when I deal with, and those IDs it's like a train. They are in a block model without being a blockchain, but they're in a block model digitally signed by your PII. So if you lose your bank account, you might just shut down the financial ID, but you don't lose who you are. The who you are is always with you. And in that model of having somebody to trust your PII, you need a third trusted party. Without a third trusted party, you don't exist for that organization. So one of the PII third trusted party delegations that you will have here is that you are a citizen of the country. I mean, your government has to issue that element. So very important when we design blockchains model, then we differentiate where a vertical model using the fundamentals of PKI and cryptography applies versus open a peer-to-peer model, which might be for sport activities, maybe sending a small amount of money, and so on, which you don't need to have a verticalization. Another thing is important is revocation. Blockchain doesn't have revocation. Somebody has said before, if I send you the money and I made a mistake and I revoke that transaction, you cannot. So revocation is essential because in trust, because if I trust you today, I might not trust you tomorrow, and I should be able to revoke my trust. So the revocation aspects of PKI needs to be embedded on blockchains. So the good news is that the ecosystem is getting very big. So I really believe that the big advantage of blockchain revolution is that it's creating international awareness about encryption, about dual-factor authentication, about time stamping, about digital signature, things that before people didn't discuss, didn't even understood, you know? So there's a new culture of mathematicians, cryptographers, and they are entering into the web, bringing new solutions, which I think is a great thing. So a big ecosystem is happening. As you know, some banks are entering into the blockchain world. Some of them, they are just hypocritical. I mean, they're not doing that seriously. They just enter just because they want to be sure that they control the process rather than absorb the process. But they are entering. A blockchain economy is already $1 billion economy. It's not yet $1 trillion economy, which is the web economy, but it's growing. And it's allowing newcomers to ask the right questions. I think one of the problems, back again to my discussion with Tim Berners-Lee, was that if the internet was not, and the web in particular, did not have an identity layer, then we stay nearly 25 years just using the web as a merchandising publicity environment. We didn't use it really transactionally, you know? And this has been the big failure of the first generation, is that the transactions did not happen in the way that could have happened if from day one, every single user of the internet will have been used PKI, electronic signatures, digital identification, because a lot of the things that blockchain does, like time stamping, is a function of PKI. You can do time stamping with PKI in a very sophisticated way. So the ecosystem is growing, and this is good news for everybody, because I think as we will mature this vision of blockchain and the technology, the merge is going to happen against the underlying infrastructure on the World Wide Web. Actually, Tim Berners-Lee about 2 weeks ago said, for first time, because at the beginning he didn't want to say that blockchain was actually very complementary to the World Wide Web. And I think that's a very important message, right? So the ecosystems are facing problems as delivering what I call a blockchain blockbuster. We need something like, wow, it really works. For the moment, we are solving small things, small problems. We are sending some money, but it still is very small. Whether there are organizations like in the 4 verticalizations, and they are doing everything currently in the society. I mean, SWIFT transfers nearly $1 trillion per day on secure transactions. SWIFT has been hacked. SWIFT is looking for a new model, and SWIFT is still the intra-banking transaction process, the one we know, the one we trust, right? Despite that in the last months, SWIFT has its own problem. But what about bringing SWIFT to the blockchain? I mean, this is what we need now. We need international organizations are really thinking about it, the UN is thinking about it. The United Nations just 2 months ago organized a conference in New York, which I was there, on where they say by the year 2030, every single citizen in the world should have what they call a official identity, an identity that recognizes that person towards the internet. So that person with that identity can do transactions. Because as you know, every day the world has a million of new people that arrive, which we don't even know them. We don't have their identity. We are unable to talk to them. We are unable to help them. We are unable to feed them because they just don't exist on the digital ecosystem. So the identification of people is something that could be accelerated by one of those big organizations like the UN, like SWIFT, like the World Bank, to come into that. The problem for that is the non-controlling aspect of blockchain which scares those organizations, because you will need to draft legislation, and international legislation is very difficult to draft. Actually, one of the reasons why PKI did not explode and become massive, which could have happened, is because the UN didn't have a body that handles that. You know, we only have the United Nations Commission for Trade Laws that set some kind of standards, and ITU, which is the X509 standard, but we needed somebody with enough political muscle to say, hey, the World Wide Web needs to be secure, and this is a way to do it. So this is only to demonstrate, in our case in Switzerland, how we are integrating the blockchain into the financial system. I mean, there's three major projects in Switzerland going on in blockchain. One is UBS, the bank itself. So the good news is that UBS has decided to go all the way blockchain, and UBS is issuing a financial identity, which is an attribute based on a cryptographic key, and they are putting together every single organization that deals with UBS has to adopt the blockchain architecture that UBS is suggesting. So that's an interesting way to make sure that everybody's going to do with you, is going to work with you towards that, is that lawyers, consultants, everybody that deals with the UBS, they have to apply the same level of identity security and blockchain portability. And this is creating an ecosystem. The ecosystem needs to start somewhere. It cannot be a peer-to-peer only. It needs to be one organization, whether it's government or financial sector or land registry or something that becomes very obvious that blockchain can really accelerate the functionality of that vertical to take that decision. So issues and priorities. So one of the angles of, and it has been a lot of press around that, is about cybersecurity versus blockchain. How the current cybersecurity, I mean, one of the previous speakers say about one of the risks will be that somebody with enough money buys all the miners and then has the possibility to influence the neutrality of the blockchain process. This is one possibility. Another possibility is energy. You know, blockchain is one of the most demanding, especially mining. Mining needs a lot of computing power, which needs a lot of energy, to the point that experts are saying if blockchain really scales into IoT, which is, I will say, is the final test for blockchain, whether blockchain can decentralize what you call the industrial internet, which is the 20 billion objects that we are connected to the internet. So people are saying if that happens, experts are saying if that happens, the new currency of the world will be energy. Only the countries with energy will be able to mine. So it will not be gold. It will not be traditional materials. The next currency is energy. So in this conspiration model that I've been working in the UN, we have been always working, what about if that is the final plan? What about if this is actually the final plan to create an economy which depends so heavily on energy that only the countries that they will have ultra-performing energy capabilities will be able to mine in the future. So think about it always when you are implementing a new technology. You have to always project that technology 25 years from now and see what could be the consequences. So in Switzerland, we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of water, we have a lot of plants. And actually, one of the decisions of the government to move into blockchain was to create some modeling processes on the potential use of energy on mining. Another problem of blockchain does not scale well. If we connect 20 billion devices, and those devices talking between themselves, because that means a sensor in the car talking to your alarm system in the house, talking to your office, talking to your sensor, to your meter, that creates exatrillion possibilities. I mean, this is 20 billion devices talking to another 20 billion devices. So blockchain for the time being, a global blockchain does not scale well. So now companies like General Electric, like SAP, they are developing industrial blockchains that they are more focused on sectors, independent sectors. For instance, one of the things we are doing now in Switzerland with a French company is to add an identity on chips, on microchip. Actually, we acquired a company in France which is one of the leading on microchips, and we are adding an identity on the chip, we are adding on the chip a digital certificate, and we are connecting that chip to the blockchain. Another thing we are doing is, so those chips, when they interact with themselves, they report to the ledger that they have been on, off, has been compromised, not compromised, and that's the only thing the ledger needs to know. You don't need to collect more data. The rest of the data goes to the cloud. So I really, as I said before, I believe IoT is one of the drivers. In IoT, the current situation of IoT is very similar to the current situation of the web. Is that manufacturers of IoT do not necessarily recognize the need to add an identity into an object. So in the same vision that Mauritius become a platform, you could imagine putting an identity on every object you produce and force your clients to do the same on every object they sell to you. You know, WISeKey, one of our clients is Cisco. Cisco has routers, Cisco routers. Cisco routers were counterfeited. There's a lot of counterfeiting in Cisco routers. So somebody installs a fake Cisco router, think it's a real router. That Cisco router sends data to the hacker, right? And Cisco believes then that this is a real router, and the bank or financial institution thinks is a real router. So putting a chip, a semiconductor chip, on the router and being able to that chip to send data to the blockchain saying, I am actually, as a certificate of origin, I belong to Cisco, and here you can check me out. That solves the counterfeiting. The world market on counterfeiting is $1 trillion economy. It's 5% of global trade goes to counterfeiting. So the authentication of our object is a huge market for blockchain. The other is luxury products. You know, in Switzerland, again, we are working with Bulgari, and we actually even create something we call the intelligent watch, which is a watch that connects to the internet. You can buy that watch online. And that watch actually sends a digital identity to a vault, which encrypts all the data of the user. And that identity is also now integrated into a blockchain. So every single Bulgari client adds to the Bulgari blockchain. We just announced WISeID, which is an app you can download for free. And WISeID sits on the top of the blockchain. WISeID issues a cryptographic identity for a person. Then you can store all your credit cards, your social security numbers, all the documents you need to remember. You need to prove that it's yours, and you put that in an encrypted cloud, which in the case of Switzerland is located in a military bunker in the Swiss Alps. And from there, from that cloud, you download the data directly from your mobile. And your identity is also on a blockchain. So everybody else in the world knows that you are an authenticated person. So we only use the blockchain not to authenticate you, but just to inform that you are the right person. We are also using blockchain with the World Economic Forum in land registries. A lot of corruption going on. I think one of the issues that blockchain solves very well is corruption, actually. It solves the problem of corruption in many cases. Land registry, there are projects in Latin America, in Mexico, Ecuador, where if a new president arrives or a new group of politicians arrive, and they have all their friends, and they take away the ownership rights of the people. So imagine a poor farmer that has a land somewhere, and the only document he has is a very old piece of document that he got from his father. That document, if he loses that document, in some legislations around the world, you lose the land. So the project there is just to take that document, put that document in a blockchain, so every single person can check that that document exists and that person is the owner of that land. So there are many reasons to use the blockchain for transactions that they really improve the operations. So I talk about this. So this is the, we only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to run and open for questions. This is the application I mentioned to you, which is, again, the view is to create your identity first in your mobile phone. And this is something which I am suggesting very strong to launch in a project, which I'm going to show you. Sorry, I'm just going to move a bit, which is my proposal for you guys. So I really believe that Mauritius, for the reason I mentioned before, is uniquely positioned in the region to become what I will call a blockchain as a service platform. So rather than building a blockchain and see how you send Bitcoin, which is actually cool, but everybody's doing that. And actually the entry level is so low that even a young kid can develop an app to do that. That will be no news whatsoever. What about if you become as you did in the past on e-commerce, as you did in the past with the web, a regional platform? You become a platform, you invest in the underlying requirements to become a blockchain as a service platform. What I mean by as a service? As a service means that if I am a company and I want to invest in your country, which by the way, I would love to do so, I don't want to start from scratch. I don't want to build my bunkers, my cryptographic keys, know whether the country has a root key, handle all the legislation issues of that. I really want that already there in the platform. And the platform should also be able to be blockchain ready. So then I can develop my application. I can bring my expertise and put that in a way that from Mauritius, I can sell that product that I develop on the top of your platform to the rest of the world. This model will also allow you to interconnect with other platforms, like in Switzerland, like in London, like smart cities are doing. We have a project with Microsoft with the name CityNext, which is actually building blockchain on Azure, on the platform Azure. And that will allow you immediately to get the traction of the big guys, because they say, wow, this country actually has solved already the underlying issues to create a blockchain. So those are projects that attract a lot of investment into your country. It will attract a lot of know-how and will attract a lot of startups, because startups will not need to have massive amount of money to develop a blockchain. And again, if I will be an investor and somebody says to me, wow, I develop a blockchain wallet, I say, well, okay, fine, you know, there's so many. I mean, that happens every day. It's no big deal about that. But if somebody says to me, hey, I have developed a health blockchain architecture that can allow all your medical records to be certified and stored in encrypted clouds where everybody through a blockchain will have immediate access, I will immediately buy that, because I know that so many other countries in the world are trying to achieve that. So that's the model. You become a platform. Inside that trusted platform, everything is structured, everything is secure, and including the smart cities of the future and the Internet of Things revolution. And within that platform, you are sure that everything is trusted and under your control. So thank you very much. Again, a pleasure to be back in Mauritius. If we can be of any help, I will be delighted. If you have any questions, or you have, I don't know how much time we have, but okay, we have time for some questions.